welcome to It's All Plastic episode 3. In this episode, we bring to you an expert voice to talk about plastic packaging and the producer's responsibility to ensure a circular economy. Symphony Environmental India offers a revolutionary solution to make plastics biodegradable. The company is involved in research and development in the field of additives, which is a substance when added to plastic makes it biodegradable. To discuss this in detail, we're in conversation with Sunil Panwar, who's the CEO of Symphony Environmental India. Thank you so much, Sunil, for taking out time and speaking to me.
You're doing something wonderful to take up matters related to packaging and plastic. You are also breaking a lot of myths and bringing facts to the masses, and that itself is wonderful, in addition to creating the awareness, what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Plastic is poisoning the world, and people are desperately looking for sustainable, eco-friendly, and guilt-free alternatives. At such a time, Symphony Environmental says it is making plastic smarter, safer, and sustainable by ensuring its degradation. Could you elaborate on this?
Plastic has become a problem. It is easier to blame the materials. We invented a material which has certain usefulness, and when it comes to the packaging requirements, it has been also seen as a wonderful product which can be recycled number of times, which provides some very useful applications in terms of barrier properties. But I think we humans haven't handled the material in a more responsible way. Had we done that right from the beginning, from the time when we started to use the material, in a much more responsible way, where we had not discarded it in an irresponsible way, we had recycled it as much as possible, we could have handled this matter in much more productive, environmentally friendly way. It only started to hit us when we started feeling the impact on health and the results of long-term damage that has happened actually. Symphony Environmental has been doing R&D for more than 25 years in making plastics biodegradable and environmentally safe, actually. If a D2W additive, which is the brand we use for the additives, which we use to make biodegradable plastics, only 1% of that is added at the initial production stage. And it is the mixing that happens at an early stage of many other products when you take it into production along with the resin, be it polyethylene or polypropylene. So thereafter, there's no change required whatsoever. Smarter because the additive stays inside. It will allow food to stay in the packaging as it would be in any other conventional way. It'll be there until the usage life ends, or you can say up to the shelf life of the product. Once the product is used and the packaging material is discarded, only then it starts to work, which is approximately about 1 year actually. The long chain polymers actually, this can take, depending on the type that you're using for packaging, anything between 100 to 500 days. It will stay there before naturally the environment takes care of that actually. That is a very long time. And since the process is so slow, it keeps disintegrating with time. The particle size start becoming smaller if it is lying in the open environment or landfill with oxidation. When the particle size becomes smaller, it still remains plastic. When marine life particularly consider this to be a food item and they consume it, it stays there in the gut, and from there it becomes part of the food chain. Then the plastic gets consumed by humans. Additives, what we produce does is it rapidly starts to break down the long chain polymers into shorter chains. It starts to absorb the water, the microbes that are present, it becomes food for them. So it penetrates into the structure and it starts to mineralize that. And there are certain type of bacteria who love to feed on that. So what is happening is we're converting matter from one form to another. They consume it, they emit small amount of CO2, some water is formed, and the biomass, bioassimilated mass is left. When that is tested, it is found to be free of ecotoxicity. And all this process, anything between 17 to 22 months, it converts that into biomass.
I think you've mentioned some very, very crucial points there, Sunil, because I totally agree that we cannot just blame the material for being toxic or for spoiling the environment or affecting the health of humans. After all, right from the first type of plastic that was manufactured, when we talk about Parksine, to now, as you mentioned, when we've been surrounded by plastics all over us, I think humans are also to be blamed to change the way plastics are formed as per our convenience. Symphony Environmental focuses on two major solutions that you mentioned about. One is D2P and another one is D2W. Can you tell us more about these? And do you think these two solutions are a turning point in the plastics industry?
D2W is a range of biodegradable technologies. In that, we have different grades. To give you an example, a milk pouch packet, which is made of high-grade food polymer, it can get used up in maximum 3 to 5 days.
Right.
Whereas if a spare part or a component packed also in a polyethylene bag, it can stay in packaging for nearly a year or even a little longer, actually. Then we have examples of paint buckets, which is made of polypropylene, actually. There are many companies who have come forward and shown interest to make those containers biodegradable. A paint may stay in the packaged condition for longer than 1 year. For that, we need a special additive. So it is purpose designed, customized on the end use requirement, depending on the what usage life cycle of that product is going to be. Then there's another range, and which has amazing properties. It's called D2P, designed to protect technologies. And it is used in both food and non-food applications. If you make the packaging material with D2P, antimicrobial application treatment in it, in the packaging in the inner layer, you have antimicrobial property imparted. And it doesn't affect the food at all. It just creates a barrier and it destroys the microbial growth. If you make packaging material which is smart, which can take care of that microbial growth, then either you can totally eliminate the use of preservatives, giving you the same shelf life, or you can extend the shelf life by reducing the use of preservatives, actually. So for bread, for example, if it is not used up within the prescribed use by date, then it is returned to the vendor. Whereas if at retail shop, if they get 1 day extra, then the chances are that everything will get sold. There are trials that have been done even in Indian conditions, 3 to 4 days, easily extended shelf life can be given by imparting antimicrobial treatment, actually. And it is absolutely food safe. The other application is called ethylene adsorbers. In fruits and vegetables in India, we have a huge problem that more than 30% of the agro-produce gets perished or become not suitable for use before it reaches the consumer in the transit itself. And that happens because once the ripening process starts, the ethylene gas which is released, it rapidly then further ripens the product, actually. And when it becomes overripe, it becomes unfit for human consumption. So if packaging material is designed in such a way that it absorbs the ethylene gas which is being made, then you can increase the shelf life of the product. It stays fresh for longer without any chemical treatment. It has no impact on the food, actually. Also, for farmers, in drip irrigation, the pipes that are used are soft, actually. Insects in the fields tend to bite it, and the holes get created. Because of that, the wastage of water happens, and the farmers have to rapidly replace it. So there are anti-insect treatments which you add while the production of drip irrigation pipes is happening. And then the insects don't bite it.
Biodegradable plastic technology and plastic solutions is undoubtedly a responsible solution for plastic products and packaging needs, of course. But do you think encouraging a throwaway practice or encouraging a practice where the customer knows that something that they're using is biodegradable will sort of stand in the way of getting rid of plastic? Why I'm saying that is because when the 3 R's of sustainability came into place, they were reduce, reuse, and recycle. But the focus has always been on recycle. The focus has always been how to get rid of plastic after we are done using them. So, do you think this will stand in the way of customers saying, no, I don't want plastic in the first place?
Navya, what I would say here is the first of all, the answer is no, it won't happen.
Okay.
But to be more realistic,
Hmm.
and why it will not happen, I'll explain that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to sustainability, I think it's a very inclusive process and collaborative process, actually.
Hmm.
We can't just think that if you have designed a product smartly,
Hmm.
then it will take care of itself and the responsibility of consumer goes away. That is not the case. I think it's a collaborative effort where the producer who is making that product, who is taking responsibility of bringing it to the consumer who is using it, packaging material manufacturers, the government, the regulators, who would provide the required infrastructure, actually. Everyone has a role to play.
True.
Then only we can make it absolutely safe for ourselves and for future generations. When we say ourselves, along with that, I would also like to include other life forms who exist for no
Yes.
fault of theirs. We've
Yes.
seen images, where they're suffering because of the irresponsible behavior of humankind. D2W packaging additives has both the properties in it. The recyclable nature of the product remains as it is. It has no impact on it, actually. More like an insurance policy. In case it gets irresponsibly discarded, then the material will take care of itself. I would rather put in terms of priority, reduction in use is most important.
Absolutely.
Second, I would say is reuse as much as possible. Recycling only comes third. If you reuse and reduce, the requirement of recycling will by itself get reduced, actually. Recover the material as much as possible. What we do as Symphony, we take approach where we have redesigned a product in such a way that even if it goes for recycling, then it is getting recycled in the normal way, the way the product has been done so far. But yes, in India, statistically, 60% of our plastic waste material post-consumer does get recycled. 40% ends up becoming single-use plastic. And here the recycling rate is better than, if you look at the global standards, particularly if you compare it with developed countries. We can't be hoping that we can eliminate it while it should happen, but it doesn't seem like a practical, possibility. So in that case, if we have material which does not stay for too long and in an environmentally friendly way can self-destroy itself, is the need of the time, which is what we do.
Sunil, I understand that the company is solving one of world's most severe and challenging problems of non-biodegradable plastic waste. At such a time, what are the challenges that stand in the way of redesigning plastic? What are the challenges that Symphony Environmental has seen?
The biggest challenge that we face is the awareness is not enough. The myths are too many, actually, which need to be dismantled. We are teaching our children plastic is bad. We should be teaching them how to handle it responsibly. Can you imagine a scenario? You get up, instead of using toothbrush, you have something else. Yes, you can have neem ka datun or something else, but is it practical? The milk that we are receiving in India, in other parts of the world, it comes in PET can. In India, mostly it is coming in pouches. Some small quantity does come in glass bottles, but that's limited, actually. All the spices that we get, from sugar to salt, to name any item, actually, the bread which we eat in our breakfast, everything is coming in plastic packaging, and there are practical problems. You can't change it to paper or some other material. There are many items which look like paper, but they're laminated with plastic to assign certain kind of strength or a barrier property in it. The governments have not established in most countries the standards of what a biodegradable material should be like actually. Setting up a standard is also time-consuming process. From 1st July 2022, we did implement Indian plastic waste management rules, but in a practical way, we have not been able to implement it because our test standard was established also around the same time. Now, in India, we have nearly 1.5 lakh manufacturers of plastic packaging materials. If each manufacturer sends even 2 samples for testing, there is a requirement of nearly 3 lakh samples to be tested. In India, we don't have capacity to test, according to my estimate, give or take, whatever, a few hundred, is about 1,000 samples in a year we can test because it is a long duration test. It takes nearly 2 to 2.5 years to test one sample. Majority of the companies, nearly 1.3 lakh companies, are in MSME sector. So when they send a sample for testing, they have to pay anything between 4.5 lakh to 5.5 lakh rupees per sample for testing, and then wait for 2.5 years. Now, they have to continue to do business. They can't shut down because there is a large employment at stake. People who have submitted the samples and who have shown the intent to comply with the law should be permitted to continue their production until such time that testing is complete, which is not the case. So it has caused a lot of confusion. Samples from Mexico comes to India for testing because globally there is a constraint in testing capacity. If we have a requirement of, say, 3 lakh samples and only 1,000 we can test, that means it will take 300 years for all the producers to get the samples. Can we wait for this long? No.
As we discussed in the previous episode, something like EPR or extended producer responsibility holds the producer responsible for products and packaging extending to the post-consumer phase. Do you think it is a step in the right direction? And do you think it can help us achieve a circular economy?
I think you asked a very, very valid question. EPR, extended producer responsibility, has, as a concept, existed for quite some time, actually. Yes, I think it is a very good concept. What EPR does is, let me give you an example of, say, bread packaging.
Okay.
Some company X has produced it.
Okay.
Brand Y is marketing it, actually. Customer C buys it. Either they can discard it using the proper waste segregation, solid waste segregation method, so that it goes into the possibility of recycling increases. Or if it gets littered in a responsible way, or it gets mixed with the wet consumer waste, it gets contaminated, then it is of no use for recycling in that case. In India, we generate currently approximately 9.4 million metric tons of consumer plastic waste. Out of that, we do recycle about 5.6 million metric tons. And 3.8 million metric tons currently ends up becoming single-use plastic, actually. There are 2 major challenges I will put forward.
Sure.
One is a registered recycler has to have enough feedstock coming from the collection to get it recycled. So that is one challenge that we have in India. So every individual who is involved in the process has to be educated. And waste is not just getting generated by people who have house help or servants. Every consumer needs to be educated about it.
Absolutely.
They have to get into a habit that they segregate their waste. I live in suburbs of NCR in a place called Gurgaon, where Municipal Corporation of Gurgaon has implemented this. They have made all residential communities and RWAs, residential welfare associations, responsible for this. But these are minuscule parts of India. India lives in A, B, C class cities, in villages, in small towns. There, these processes don't exist. In parallel, how to maintain the inflow of the feedstock, which depends on the downstream processes, the quality of the feedstock also, how to maintain that so that the recycling is of better quality.
Yeah.
All these things have to work in tandem.
Yeah.
Then and only then EPR can be effectively implemented.
Viewers watching this interview will have a lot of takeaways right from when we started discussing about how plastic has changed over the years, how humans have been consuming plastics in different ways around them, and how recycling has a lot of challenges when it comes to solving the plastic crisis, and how technologies like D2P and D2W are solving this crisis. So I think you've explained all of this very wonderfully, and I'm sure it'll be beneficial for viewers because, as you said, there is fragmented awareness when it comes to plastic crisis, which is why News with Navya has come up with this show, It's All Plastic. So I'd like to thank you for taking our time and speaking to me today.